My parents told me to never trust the new neighbor because he spied on the kids, so I spied on him instead, and what I discovered made me realize why my parents said what they said. I was 10 when Dr. Boogeyman moved into the neighborhood. At first I thought he looked cool. He wore these huge Prada sunglasses, always carried a tote bag with a book inside, and had icy blue eyes filled with wisdom. But when my parents saw me interacting with him, they punished me. Nothing severe, just a stern talking to. Turns out, he was a pediatrician that had lost his practice for unauthorized procedures on minors, meaning he was accused of feeding them unlicensed medication for experimental purposes. But back then, I didn't know what that meant, so they just told me he was the boogeyman, and if I talked to him for too long, I would turn to stone. This made sense to me, because everyone else steered clear of him too. Neighbors crossed streets to avoid him. The school bus driver skipped his stop even though kids lived nearby. His hello or good morning was always met with silence or the extremely awkward white person smile. But I was a pretty rebellious kid, the type to push cookies from the shopping market shelf into the trolley when my mom told me no sugar. And I had watched so much Percy Jackson that I even had a crush on Medusa, so I thought turning into stone would be pretty cool. So I started paying attention to him to see if what my parents were saying was true. And in my journey of borderline stalking Dr. Boogeyman, I noticed something. He spent almost all of his time outside, specifically walking up and down Pine Street, the wealthiest area within a 5-mile radius. TBH, me and my parents all thought he was panhandling or something, because he didn't know anyone that lived there. In fact, the bougie adults treated him even worse than we did. They'd spit on the ground beside him, scoff, or even whisper things like traitor. But none of that stopped him from taking a gander around the neighborhood and peeping over the fence towards the kids' playground. So I followed his gaze, and yes, his eyes would run along their bodies, but it wasn't in a creepy way, because he'd stroke his goatee and scrunch up his face almost as if he was in deep concentration, like the way a parent examines their child's knee when they fall on the concrete. One afternoon in summer, I was passing by an alleyway beside Pine Street. I had never walked down it before because I was scared that it'd smell like pee. But that day, I could hear what sounded like someone my age crying, and curiosity got the better of me. So I sneaked over to take a peek, and that's when I saw it. Dr. Boogeyman on his knees for a kid in my class, Sammy, treating a cut on his back. Sammy saw me first and immediately cried out, "Please don't tell my mom." That's when Dr. Boogeyman turned to me with a look of terror in his eyes. Sammy immediately sat up. "The adults are lying, Leo. He's not the boogeyman. His name is Dr. Bumble. He helps heal me when mommy and daddy hit me." Dr. Bumble cut in. "Listen, you're too young to understand right now, but I need you to trust me. Sometimes parents hurt their children in ways that leave marks. When I was their doctor, I tried to tell people who could help, but these parents are very powerful and made everyone believe I was the bad guy instead. Now I can't work as a doctor anymore, but I still check on these kids because no one else will." Back then, I didn't really understand what he was saying, but there was something in his eyes that made me trust him. So much so that I pinky promised not to tell my parents and helped to fix the cuts on Leo's back. For weeks after that, I'd secretly meet Dr. Bumble in that same alley, bringing supplies from my house, bandages, antiseptic, even ice packs. More kids started showing up, kids I knew, kids whose parents drove Teslas and donated wings to the hospital. Then one night, everything changed. I was sneaking out to meet Dr. Bumble when I saw police cars surrounding his house. My parents were outside with the other neighbors, and my mom was crying. My mother grabbed me, tears streaming down her face. They arrested Dr. Bumble for having illegal medical supplies, and they found photos of children in his house. Her fingers dug into my shoulders as she shook me. "Did he ever touch you? Did he take pictures?" I tried to pull away. "Mom, those must be documentation photos of the kids' injuries. He was helping them." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My father's hand left a burning mark across my cheek. "Don't you dare defend that monster. He's a pedophile who lost his license for experimenting on children." I stumbled backward, my hand pressed against my stinging face. My father had never hit me before, not like this. The other neighbors were dispersing, whispering among themselves. I caught fragments of their conversations about disturbing evidence, and thank God they finally caught him. The next morning, I looked for Sammy at school. His desk sat empty. When I raised my hand to ask, Mrs. Peterson turned from the board. Fresh scratches ran down her neck, disappearing under her collar. They looked like the kind of marks someone small might leave if they were fighting back. "Where's Sammy?" I asked. "His family decided to homeschool him for personal reasons." She tugged her collar higher. "Now please focus on your math worksheet." During recess, I tried telling my friends about the alley meetings, about how Dr. Bumble was actually helping kids. They backed away from me like I had a disease. Word must have spread because by lunch, I was eating alone. That evening, I pretended to do homework while my parents watched the news. The reporter stood outside Dr. Bumble's house, describing the evidence found inside. Medical supplies without prescriptions, photographs of children with various injuries, a hidden camera. My stomach churned. They were making it sound so wrong when I knew the truth. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead crept to my parents' room. My father's phone lay charging on the nightstand. I scrolled through his texts until I found a group chat labeled Pine Street Watch. The messages made my blood run cold. "Bumble's finally out of the picture. Make sure the kids stay quiet. Patterson's handling the cleanup." A noise from downstairs sent me scrambling back to my room. That night, I lay awake thinking about Sammy's frightened face in that alley, about all the other kids who showed up with bruises and cuts, about how Dr. Bumble was the only adult who seemed to care. The next day after school, I told my parents I was going to the library. Instead, I headed toward Pine Street. Something was happening, and I needed to understand what. As I passed the Patterson house, I heard voices coming from an open basement window. I recognized Mr. Patterson's deep tone. I crept closer, my Nintendo 3DS clutched in my sweaty hands. My parents didn't know it had a camera function. I discovered it by accident last month. Now I pressed record and held it near the window gap. "Just sign the confession, Bumble." Mr. Patterson's voice was calm, almost friendly. "Admit you were taking inappropriate photos of children. Admit you were grooming them with medical care. Make this this easy on everyone. I have copies of all the evidence hidden where you'll never find them. Dr. Bumble's voice sounded strained but defiant. I'd rather die than let you keep hurting those children. Another voice joined in, Mr. Harrison from 2 houses down. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a disgraced doctor who couldn't mind his own business. Those children had spiral fractures, cigarette burns, bite marks. Dr. Bumble's voice grew stronger. You've been rotating them between houses to let injuries heal before anyone notices. I documented everything. A phone rang. Mr. Patterson answered. What do you mean Leo's missing? His parents said he was at the library. A pause. Find him. If he heard about Bumble's arrest and starts talking. Yes, I understand. We'll handle it. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were looking for me. I needed to get help, but who would believe a 10-year-old over respected Pine Street residents? Jackson, you stay here and watch him, Mr. Patterson ordered. Harrison and I will help search for the boy. Footsteps headed toward the basement stairs. I scrambled behind the recycling bins, still recording. After their car pulled away, I knew I had to act. Dr. Bumble was alone with just one guard. I remembered his car parked on the street, the one with the really loud alarm he'd accidentally set off last week. The keys might still be in his tote bag if they'd brought his things. I crept around to the basement door. It was unlocked, probably so they could come and go easily. Moving as quietly as possible, I descended the stairs. Jackson sat in a chair facing Dr. Bumble, who was tied to a support beam. The tote bag lay discarded in the corner. I reached for it, feeling inside for keys. The alarm split the air like a siren. Jackson jumped up, cursing. What the hell? He ran up the stairs to investigate. Dr. Bumble's eyes found mine. Leo, the rope, quickly! My fingers fumbled with the knots. I recorded everything on my 3DS. They said they're rotating kids between houses. I know. I've been building a case with a state prosecutor from outside the county. The local authorities are either bribed or threatened by Pine Street money. The last knot came free. Dr. Bumble rubbed his wrists, then moved toward Jackson's abandoned chair. Stand back. When Jackson came back down, muttering about false alarms, Dr. Bumble was ready. In one smooth motion, he wrapped his arm around Jackson's neck from behind. Sleeper hold. Learned it in medical school for restraining violent patients. He'll be fine in a few hours. Jackson struggled briefly before going limp. Dr. Bumble lowered him carefully to the floor. We need to get to the alley. I have emergency contacts there. We ran through the darkening streets. My legs burned, but I kept pace. Behind us, I heard car engines starting. They'd discovered Jackson. The alley appeared ahead. Dr. Bumble pulled out a hidden cell phone from behind a loose brick. His fingers flew over the screen. Maya, it's happening. Bring Dr. Harrison and whoever you trust. They tried to force a confession. I have a witness. Car headlights swept across the alley entrance. Mr. Patterson stepped out, baseball bat in hand. Mr. Harrison and 3 other Pine Street fathers followed. Well, the pedophile kidnapped little Leo. What a tragedy when we find his body. Play it, Dr. Bumble whispered. I pulled out my 3DS, cranking the volume. Mr. Patterson's recorded voice filled the alley. You've been rotating them between houses to let injuries heal before anyone notices. The men froze. Mr. Patterson's face went pale. That's fake. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can. A woman's voice came from behind them. Maya stood there with an older man in a suit and 2 state troopers. Not local police, but actual state troopers with different uniforms. Dr. Harrison here is my social work professor. He has connections to state child protective services. These officers aren't on anyone's payroll. This is all a misunderstanding, Mr. Patterson started, but a small voice interrupted. Help us. From the Pattersons' garden shed, 3 small figures emerged. Sammy was in front, his arms covered in old and new bruises. 2 other children followed, walking stiffly like movement hurt. Dr. Harrison, the professor, not the abuser, stepped forward. His face went white. Those are ritual abuse patterns. I've studied cases like this. He turned to the state troopers. We need emergency custody removal immediately. The state troopers moved toward the Pine Street fathers. You're under arrest for child endangerment and conspiracy. Wait, my father's voice. My parents had arrived with other neighbors. We didn't know. We were threatened too. I held up my 3DS again. Another recording I'd made while scrolling through my father's phone played. His laugh echoed in the alley. That pedophile got what he deserved. Maybe this will teach Leo a lesson about defending freaks. My mother's sob cut through the night. The state troopers cuffed the Pine Street fathers while Dr. Harrison made phone calls. Child protective services arrived within the hour. Sammy and the other children were taken to the hospital for documentation and treatment. I sat in the back of a state police car, not under arrest, but for protection, while they sorted everything out. Dr. Bumble sat beside me, finally free. You're the bravest kid I know, Leo. What happens now? I asked. Now we make sure those children get justice and healing. He squeezed my shoulder gently. And you get somewhere safe too. My grandmother arrived at the police station. She'd driven 3 hours after getting the call. I always knew something was wrong with that neighborhood, she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. You're coming home with me. The next months blurred together. The Pine Street parents were held without bail. The children testified via closed-circuit TV, never having to face their abusers in person. Dr. Bumble's medical license was reinstated with a formal apology from the medical board. The photos they'd found were indeed documentation of abuse, carefully cataloged with dates and medical notes. 6 months later, I visited Dr. Bumble's new clinic. Maya worked there as an intern while finishing her social work degree. The walls were covered with thank you cards and children's drawings. In the main room, Sammy stood before a group of younger kids. It's okay to tell safe adults when someone hurts you, he said, his voice strong and clear. Even if they say no one will believe you, even if they're rich or important, someone will listen. I watched from the doorway as Dr. Bumble checked on a new patient, his movements gentle and careful. He'd been right about one thing during our first real conversation in that alley. I had been too young to understand then, but now I knew the truth. Sometimes the real monsters are the ones everyone trusts most. The morning after visiting Dr. Bumble's clinic, I woke to find my grandmother pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Her knuckles were white around the receiver. No, I don't care what your lawyer says, she snapped. My grandson isn't testifying in person. The judge already approved closed circuit. She slammed the phone down and turned to me, forcing a smile. Pancakes? I nodded, but my appetite vanished when I saw the newspaper on the table. The headline read, read, Pine Street parents claim frame-up in abuse case. Below was a photo of Mr. Patterson in an expensive suit, surrounded by lawyers. Don't look at that garbage, Grandma said, snatching the paper away. They're just trying to muddy the waters before the trial. School in my new town was different. Nobody knew about Pine Street or Dr. Bumble or what I'd done. I could just be Leo, the kid who moved in with his grandma. But at night, I'd lie awake replaying that basement recording, wondering if I'd missed something important. 2 weeks later, Maya called. Leo, we need to talk. Can your grandma bring you to the clinic? The drive felt endless. When we arrived, Dr. Bumble's usually calm face was creased with worry. Maya sat at her desk, surrounded by papers. The Pattersons' lawyer filed a motion, Maya explained. They're claiming the 3DS recording was illegally obtained, that you were trespassing. My stomach dropped. But they were holding Dr. Bumble prisoner. We know, Dr. Bumble said gently. But they're saying I was there voluntarily for a business discussion. They have Jackson ready to testify that I came willingly. Jackson's lying, I shouted. Of course he is, Grandma said, her arm around my shoulders. But he's an adult, and you're a child. They're counting on that. Maya pulled out a folder. There's more. They've hired a private investigator. He's been asking questions about you, Leo. About your history of lying and attention-seeking behavior. What history? I was confused. Remember when you told your teacher you saw a UFO in 2nd grade? Or when you insisted you had a pet dragon? Maya's voice was gentle. Normal kid stuff, but they're twisting it. Dr. Bumble leaned forward. Leo, I need you to think carefully. That day in the basement, did you see or hear anything else? Anything we might have missed? I closed my eyes, trying to remember. The basement had smelled like mold and something else. Paint, I said suddenly. Fresh paint. And there was plastic on the floor, like they were renovating. Maya and Dr. Bumble exchanged glances. That could be important, Maya said, making notes. On the drive home, Grandma was quiet. Finally, she spoke. Your parents called again. They want to see you. No, I said immediately. I told them the same thing. But Leo, she sighed. Their lawyer is pushing for visitation rights. Says keeping you from them is alienation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sammy and the other kids. Were they okay? Were they safe? I grabbed my 3DS and scrolled through the recording again, listening with headphones. Then I heard it. In the background, barely audible under the voices, was a rhythmic beeping, like a medical machine. I'd heard that sound before, in hospitals. The next morning, I called Maya. There's beeping in the recording, like medical equipment. Send me the file, she said urgently. Our audio expert might be able to enhance it. 3 days later, Dr. Bumble called. Leo, you're brilliant. That beeping was from a portable dialysis machine. Very specific model. And guess what? Mr. Patterson's brother sells medical equipment. So he reported one stolen last month, but we think he gave it to his brother. They were keeping someone in that basement before me. Someone who needed dialysis. My mind raced. Another kid? We're not sure yet, but the state investigators are very interested. The next week brought a storm of activity. Investigators descended on Pine Street again. The Patterson house was searched top to bottom. They found the freshly painted basement room with medical hookups hidden behind new drywall. Then came the breakthrough. Mrs. Chen from 2 streets over came forward. Her elderly mother had been missing for 3 weeks. She'd thought she wandered off due to dementia, but now the timeline matched. The dialysis machine matched her medical needs. They were keeping her prisoner? I asked Maya when she called with the update. We think so. She had bruises consistent with restraint. And Leo, she saw things, heard things. The Pine Street parents would meet in that basement. She heard them discussing the children. My hands shook. Is she okay? She's in the hospital, confused but alive, and willing to testify about what she heard. The media explosion was immediate. Elderly woman held captive in Pine Street basement dominated headlines. The narrative was shifting. This wasn't just about child abuse anymore. It was about a group of wealthy families who thought they were above the law, but the Pine Street parents weren't giving up. Their lawyers held press conferences, claiming conspiracy. They suggested Dr. Bumble had orchestrated everything, that he'd coached the children, that Mrs. Chen was confused and unreliable. One afternoon, Grandma found me in my room, curled up with my old stuffed animals. Tough day? I nodded. Some kids at school found out. They're saying I'm the boy who lied about his parents. She sat on my bed. You know what's true. That's what matters. But what if the judge believes them? What if Dr. Bumble goes to jail? Then we keep fighting. Truth has a way of coming out, Leo. Sometimes it just takes time. That weekend, Maya arranged a meeting with some of the other children from Pine Street. We met at a park outside town, away from reporters and lawyers. Sammy was there, looking healthier but still thin. 2 other kids I recognized came with foster parents. Hi, Leo, Sammy said quietly. Thanks for, we didn't talk about the case. Instead, we played on the swings and shared sandwiches. But I noticed things. How one girl flinched when adults raised their voices. How a boy kept checking over his shoulder. How Sammy's foster mom had to coax him to eat. They're getting better, Maya told me as we watched them play. Therapy helps. Having people believe them helps more. A woman approached our group. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. Maya, I'm Alexandra Winters. I think we spoke on the phone? Maya stood quickly. Mrs. Winters, thank you for coming. The woman knelt near me. You're Leo. My nephew told me about you, about how brave you were. I realized who she was. The aunt of one of the Pine Street kids, one who hadn't come to the park. She lived in another state and had been fighting for custody. I wanted to thank you, she continued, and to tell you something. I'm a forensic accountant. I've been looking into Pine Street finances, and I found something interesting. She showed Maya a folder. I caught glimpses of bank statements and highlighted numbers. They were paying Jackson, Mrs. Winters explained. Regular monthly payments for security services. But here's the interesting part. The payment started 2 years ago, long before Dr. Bumble moved to the neighborhood. Maya's eyes widened. They had Jackson watching someone else first? Multiple someones, I think. The payment amounts varied based on what he was doing. And look here, payments to a pharmacy in the next county for medications that none of the Pine Street parents were prescribed. The sedatives, I said suddenly. Both women looked at me. Dr. Bumble mentioned finding sedatives in some of the kids' systems, stuff that would make them quiet and confused. Mrs. Winters nodded grimly. The pharmacy is owned by Mr. Harrison's cousin. We're building a paper trail. The drive home was quiet until Grandma spoke. You know you'll have to testify eventually. I know. Are you ready for that? I thought about Sammy's hollow eyes, about the girl who flinched, about Mrs. Chen confused and frightened in a basement. Yes, but being ready and being prepared were different things. The Pine Street lawyers requested a competency hearing, claiming I was too young and traumatized to be a reliable witness. They brought in an expert who testified about childhood memory and suggestibility. Dr. Bumble's lawyer countered with our own expert, but doubt was creeping in. I could see it in the judge's face during the hearing. A 10-year-old's word against pillars of the community? Then Jackson disappeared. One day he was scheduled for a deposition. The next he was gone. His apartment was cleaned out, his car missing. The Pine Street lawyers claimed he'd been intimidated by the prosecution. Our side suspected he'd been paid to vanish. Without Jackson, the defense's story began to crumble. They couldn't explain the basement setup or why Dr. Bumble would voluntarily go there, but they had a new strategy: attack me. The private investigator they'd hired had been thorough. He'd interviewed my old teachers, classmates, even the librarian. They painted a picture of a lonely, imaginative child desperate for attention. Leo once spent a month insisting he could talk to animals, my second-grade teacher said in her deposition. He was very convincing, had other children believing it too. I wanted to scream that I was 7, that all kids played pretend, but Grandma held my hand and whispered, "Let them talk. The truth will win." The stress was affecting everyone. Maya developed migraines. Dr. Bumble's hands shook during examinations. The other children's foster families reported nightmares and behavioral regression. Then Mrs. Chen's daughter called. Her mother wanted to see me. We met at the hospital. Mrs. Chen was tiny in her bed, but her eyes were sharp. "You're the boy with the game machine," she said in accented English. I nodded. "I remember you. Heard your voice upstairs. Brave boy." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "They kept me 3 weeks, gave me pills, made me fuzzy, but I listened." I remembered. She told us everything. The Pine Street parents met weekly in that basement. They discussed which children were becoming problems, who might tell, how to keep them quiet. They had a doctor on payroll who would misdiagnose behavioral issues, prescribe unnecessary medications. Not Dr. Bumble, she clarified. Different doctor, from the city. He came to check on me too. Said I was confused, needed more pills. Maya was recording everything with Mrs. Chen's permission. This was huge. Another doctor involved meant a broader conspiracy, but the Pine Street parents had one more card to play. My parents sued for custody, claiming Grandma was poisoning me against them. The family court judge, different from the criminal case judge, seemed sympathetic to their arguments. "Children need their parents," she said during the hearing. "Whatever happened in the criminal matter, this court's concern is Leo's best interests." I wanted to play the recording of my father laughing about teaching me a lesson, but family court had different rules. The judge ordered supervised visitation while she considered the case. The first visit was a disaster. We met at a neutral location with a social worker present. My parents acted like nothing had happened. "We've missed you so much," Mom said. Reaching for a hug I didn't return. "Your room is just how you left it," Dad added. "Even kept your Pokemon cards organized." I said nothing for the entire hour. The social worker took notes. "This is what they want," Dr. Bumble told me later. "To wear you down, to make you doubt yourself. Don't let them." The criminal case moved forward slowly. More evidence emerged. The pharmacy records showed years of suspicious prescriptions. Financial forensics revealed a complex web of payments and bribes. 3 more doctors were implicated. 2 teachers, a police sergeant. But the defense had their own momentum. They'd hired a jury consultant, began pushing the narrative that this was a witch hunt against successful families, that Dr. Bumble was a disgraced physician seeking revenge. One night, Grandma woke me from a nightmare. I'd been dreaming about the basement, about being trapped while everyone insisted I was lying. "Want some hot chocolate?" she asked. We sat in her kitchen, the clock showing 3 a.m. "Grandma, what if they win?" She stirred her mug thoughtfully. "Then we'll know we did everything we could. But Leo, I don't think they'll win. Too many people are watching now. Too much evidence. But they're rich. They have good lawyers. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't change the truth forever. And you know what? You've already won the important part." "What do you mean?" "Those kids are safe. Dr. Bumble is free. The truth is out there. Even if some people don't want to believe it. That happened because of you." I thought about that as I sipped my chocolate. She was right. Whatever happened in court, Sammy and the others were away from their abusers. Dr. Bumble was helping kids again. That mattered. The next week brought a surprise. Jackson was found. Or rather, he turned himself in. He showed up at a police station 3 states away, asking for protection. "They threatened my family," he told investigators. "Said if I didn't disappear, my sister's kids would have accidents. But I can't do this anymore. I'll testify. Tell everything." His testimony was damning. He'd been hired 2 years ago to help control problem children during Pine Street gatherings. He'd helped restrain kids while the doctor gave injections. He'd cleaned up evidence. He'd watched Mrs. Chen on dialysis, making sure she couldn't escape. "Why Dr. Bumble?" the prosecutor asked. "He was getting too close, taking pictures, documenting injuries. Mr. Patterson said we needed to discredit him permanently. The plan was to force a confession, then make it look like he culled himself from guilt." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense lawyers looked shaken, but they rallied. Jackson was a criminal, they argued, a paid thug who would say anything for a deal. They brought character witnesses for the Pine Street parents, business partners, charity board members, all testifying to their good character. My testimony was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Bumble's lawyer prepared me carefully. "Just tell the truth," she said. "Don't try to convince anyone. Just say what you saw and heard." The night before, I couldn't eat. Grandma made my favorite foods, but everything tasted like cardboard. Maya called to wish me luck. Dr. Bumble sent a card with a simple message: "The truth is your strength." That morning, I put on my only suit. Grandma fixed my tie 3 times because her hands were shaking. The drive to the courthouse felt both endless and too quick. Reporters crowded the steps. Grandma shielded me as we pushed through. Inside, the hallway was packed with people. I saw some Pine Street parents in the crowd, their faces hard and angry. The children's testimony was being given in a separate room with video linked to the courtroom. I was grateful not to face the defendants directly, but I could see them on a monitor, sitting at their table in expensive suits. The prosecutor began with easy questions. My name, age, where I lived. Then we moved to that summer day in the alley. I told them everything. Finding Sammy injured, meeting Dr. Bumble, the secret medical sessions. My voice stayed steady until until I described my father hitting me. Then I had to stop, take a breath, continue. The defense attorney was polite but persistent. He asked about my imagination, about the UFO story from 2nd grade, about whether adults had coached me. No one told me what to say, I insisted. I recorded what I heard. I saw what I saw. But you were scared, weren't you? Confused. Sometimes when we're frightened, we misunderstand things. I wasn't confused. They were hurting kids. Dr. Bumble was helping them. That's the truth. He tried different angles. Maybe I misunderstood adult conversations. Maybe Dr. Bumble had influenced me. Maybe I wanted to feel important. I didn't want any of this, I said finally. I just wanted to help my friend. When it was over, I was exhausted. Grandma held me while I cried in the car, all the stress and fear pouring out. You did so good, she whispered. So brave. The other children testified over the following days. Sammy was clear and heartbreaking. He described years of abuse, the relief when Dr. Bumble helped him, the terror when his parents found out he'd been getting treatment. One girl showed scars. Another boy talked about the pills that made him sleep for days. Each testimony built the case piece by piece. Mrs. Chen testified from her hospital bed, frail but determined. She identified the Pine Street parents who'd visited the basement, described conversations she'd overheard about keeping children compliant. The medical evidence was overwhelming. X-rays showing old fractures that were never properly treated, blood tests revealing unprescribed medications, photos of injuries in various stages of healing. Dr. Bumble testified last. He walked the jury through each child's injuries, explaining how he'd documented everything. He showed the hidden files he'd compiled, the reports he'd tried to file before being discredited. Why didn't you stop when you lost your license? The prosecutor asked. Because the children didn't stop needing help, he said simply. I became a doctor to protect kids. Losing my license didn't change that obligation. The defense's case relied heavily on character assassination. They brought in the expert who'd evaluated me, claiming I was highly suggestible. They had a doctor testify that the injuries could have been from normal childhood accidents. They painted Dr. Bumble as a vigilante who'd recruited me for his vendetta. But their star witness was supposed to be Jackson, explaining how he'd been coerced into false testimony. Except Jackson stuck to his story. Even when they implied he'd get a lighter sentence for recanting, he didn't budge. I did terrible things, he said, but I'm not lying now. Those kids were being hurt, and I helped hurt them. That's the truth. Closing arguments took 2 days. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. Medical records, financial documents, witness testimony, recordings. They showed how it all connected, how the Pine Street parents had created a system to abuse their children while maintaining perfect reputations. The defense attacked every piece. The medical evidence was misinterpreted. The financial records showed legitimate transactions. The witnesses were confused, coerced, or lying. Dr. Bumble was a disgraced physician who'd manipulated a troubled child into helping his revenge scheme. Jury deliberation began on a Tuesday. Grandma and I stayed in a hotel near the courthouse, neither of us able to go far. Maya called with updates. Dr. Bumble sent texts of encouragement. The other families waited in their own bubbles of anxiety. 1 day passed, then 2. On the 3rd day, word came. The jury had questions. They wanted to review certain financial records. They asked for clarification on medical testimony. The lawyers debated what it meant. On the 4th day, we got word. A verdict was reached. The courtroom was packed. I sat with Grandma in the family section, surrounded by the other children's foster families and relatives. Across the aisle, Pine Street parents sat with their families, faces masks of confidence. The jury filed in. None of them looked at the defendants, which Maya said was a good sign. On the charge of conspiracy to commit child abuse, the clerk read, we find the defendant, Robert Patterson, guilty. The word hit like thunder. Guilty. 1 by 1. For each defendant, for each charge. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of child endangerment. Guilty of false imprisonment. Guilty of witness tampering. Some of the Pine Street parents showed no emotion. Others crumbled. Mr. Harrison's wife sobbed. Mrs. Patterson stared straight ahead like she couldn't process the words. Sammy's foster mom was crying. The other families held each other. Dr. Bumble sat very still, his hands clasped, head bowed. We did it, Grandma whispered. It's over. But it wasn't quite over. Sentencing would come later. Appeals would certainly follow. The family court still had to rule on my parents' custody claim. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dr. Bumble gave a brief statement about justice for the children. The prosecutors thanked the brave witnesses. The defense attorneys promised appeals, claimed miscarriage of justice. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The truth had been told. The jury had believed us. The children were safe. That night, Grandma made pancakes for dinner because neither of us could think about regular food. We ate in comfortable silence, the weight of months lifting slowly. What happens now? I asked. Now we heal, she said. All of us. And we make sure nothing like this happens again. Dr. Bumble's clinic was planning an expansion. More doctors were volunteering. Social workers were creating new protocols. The state was reviewing how abuse reports were handled. It wasn't perfect. Some people still believed the Pine Street parents were innocent. Some thought Dr. Bumble was a vigilante who'd gone too far, but change was happening. A week later, the family court ruled. The judge had reviewed all the evidence from the criminal trial. She terminated my parents' rights, citing their failure to protect me and their participation in silencing abuse reports. My parents' lawyer argued for one last visit. The judge denied it. This child has been through enough, she said. He deserves peace. Grandma adopted me officially 3 months later. The same day, Dr. Bumble's clinic held its grand reopening. The walls were covered with handprints from all the kids he'd helped. Mine was there too, right next to Sammy's. You know what this means? Dr. Bumble asked me at the ceremony. What? It means the boogeyman turned out to be the hero after all. I smiled. And the monsters turned out to be the people everyone trusted. The real lesson, he said, is that anyone can be a hero. Even a 10-year-old with a 3DS who refuses to stay quiet. Maya was starting a new program, training teachers and doctors to spot abuse signs. Mrs. Chen's daughter was funding a legal aid group for families fighting the system. The other kids were slowly healing, finding their voices. And me? I was just Leo, not the boy who exposed Pine Street, not the kid who recorded evidence. Just Leo, living with his grandma, going going to school, playing video games, but I kept my 3DS. You never know when you might need to record the truth. The Pine Street houses stood empty now, for sale signs on every lawn. The wealthy families had scattered, their reputations destroyed. Sometimes I wondered about the kids whose parents weren't convicted, the ones on the edges of the conspiracy who escaped justice. Dr. Bumble reminded me that we'd saved who we could, that perfect justice was rare, but any justice was better than none, that speaking truth to power always mattered, even when power fought back. Will it happen again? I asked him once. Somewhere else? Probably, he said honestly. But now more people know what to look for. More people will believe the children, and that's because of what you did. I thought about that a lot. How one person noticing, one person speaking up, could change everything. How a disgraced doctor who everyone called the boogeyman had been the only adult brave enough to help. How sometimes the scariest thing wasn't the monster under the bed, but the monster tucking you in. Grandma found me on the porch one evening, staring at the sunset. Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about trust, I said. How do you know who to trust? She sat beside me, considering. You look at what people do, not what they say. You trust the ones who help when helping costs them something, like Dr. Bumble, like you. I was just scared for my friends. Most heroes are. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing anyway. We sat quietly as the sun set. Somewhere kids were playing without fear. Somewhere Dr. Bumble was treating patients who finally had someone to believe them. Somewhere the truth we'd fought so hard to reveal was keeping children safe. It wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely is, but it was enough. More than enough. The monsters had been exposed. The children were free. And one 10-year-old boy had learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil is simply refusing to stay silent. As Grandma and I went inside for dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from Sammy. Thank you for believing me. I typed back, thank you for being brave enough to tell. Because in the end, that's what it all came down to. One child finding the courage to speak. One adult willing to listen. One person refusing to look away. The boogeyman had turned out to be our guardian angel. And the real monsters? They were exactly where they belonged. Behind bars. Their power broken by the simple, devastating weapon of truth. I need to craft the ending section that continues from where the middle section left off. The middle section ended with Leo reflecting on how the boogeyman turned out to be their guardian angel, and the real monsters were behind bars. I need to maintain 97% action events, approximately 1,697 words, before any resolution. Key elements to continue and resolve. The aftermath of the guilty verdict, sentencing proceedings, appeals process, family court custody decision, Leo's ongoing life with grandmother, Dr. Bumble's clinic expansion, the other children's recovery, any remaining threats or complications. I must avoid repetitive phrases and maintain fresh language throughout. The ending needs to show active developments rather than just reflection. The sentencing hearing arrived 2 months after the verdict. Grandma and I took our usual seats in the courtroom, but this time, the atmosphere felt different. The Pine Street parents wore orange jumpsuits instead of expensive suits. Their lawyers argued for minimum sentences, citing first-time offenses and community contributions. The judge listened to victim impact statements first. Sammy's foster mother spoke about his night terrors, his fear of closed doors, his inability to trust adults. Another foster parent described finding hidden food in their child's room because the kid was terrified of being starved as punishment again. When the judge announced sentences, Mr. Patterson received 25 years. Mr. Harrison got 20. The others ranged from 15 to 20 years. Their lawyers immediately filed appeals, but the judge denied bail pending appeal. The Pine Street parents would remain in custody. Outside the courthouse, a man I didn't recognize approached Grandma and me. He wore a cheap suit and had nervous eyes. "You're Leo?" he asked. Grandma stepped protectively in front of me. "Who's asking?" "I'm Alex Patterson, Robert Patterson's brother." My body tensed, ready to run. "Wait, please. I'm not here to cause trouble. I need to tell you something." Grandma's hand found mine. "Make it quick. My brother called me from jail last week. Said there are others, other neighborhoods, other groups. He gave me names, trying to bargain for a reduced sentence." Alex pulled out a folded paper. "I gave the list to the FBI, but I thought you should know. What you did, it's bigger than just Pine Street." He handed the paper to Grandma and walked away quickly. We stood there, the weight of his words settling over us. Other neighborhoods, other children. That evening, Dr. Bumble called an emergency meeting at his clinic. Maya was there, along with Mrs. Winters, the forensic accountant. Several other adults I didn't recognize filled the small conference room. "The FBI contacted me this afternoon," Dr. Bumble began. "Alex Patterson's information appears credible. They've identified similar patterns in 3 other wealthy communities across the state." A woman with short gray hair spoke up. "I'm Dr. Sarah Hendricks from the State Medical Board. We're launching a full review of prescription patterns in these areas. Your documentation methods, Dr. Bumble, are being adopted as standard protocol." Maya spread papers across the table. "We've also discovered something else. Remember the doctor who was prescribing sedatives to the Pine Street kids? Dr. Marcus Webb? He's been practicing in other states under different licenses. How is that possible?" I asked. "Medical boards don't always communicate across state lines," Dr. Hendricks explained. "But that's changing now, thanks to this case." The meeting continued for hours. Plans were made for expanding the clinic network, training programs for teachers and medical professionals, and new reporting protocols. I sat quietly, absorbing it all, until Maya noticed me yawning. "Let's get you home," Grandma said. As we drove, she glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, sweetheart? Just thinking about those other kids, in the other neighborhoods. The adults will handle it now. You've done enough." But I couldn't shake the feeling that my part wasn't over. School started again in the fall. My new teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, knew about my involvement in the Pine Street case. She pulled me aside on the first day. "If you ever need to talk, or if you notice anything concerning with other students, my door is always open," she said quietly. I nodded, appreciating her discretion. Most kids in my class didn't know about my past, and I wanted to keep it that way. 3 weeks into the school year, I noticed something. A girl named Emma always wore long sleeves, even on hot days. She flinched when teachers moved too quickly. Her lunch was always just a piece of bread and water. During recess, I found found her sitting alone under a tree. "Hi," I said, sitting nearby but not too close. "I'm Leo." She looked at me warily. "I know who you are." "Yeah? How?" "My mom saw you on the news during that trial thing." She picked at the grass. "She said you lied about your parents. What do you think?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think you lied." We sat in silence until the bell rang. As she stood to leave, her sleeve rode up, revealing finger-shaped bruises on her arm. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition in hers. She knew that I knew. "There's a clinic on Maple Street," I said carefully. "Dr. Bumble is really nice. He helps kids with injuries." She pulled her sleeve down quickly. "I have to go." I told Grandma about Emma that evening. She immediately called Dr. Bumble, who contacted Mrs. Rodriguez. Within days, a careful investigation began. Unlike with Pine Street, this time the system worked quickly. Emma and her younger brother were placed in emergency foster care while authorities investigated. Her parents were arrested 2 weeks later. Emma's mom had been drugging her to keep her quiet during parties where she was hurt. The evidence was overwhelming, partly because the investigators knew what to look for now. I saw Emma once more before she moved to live with relatives in another state. She hugged me in the school hallway, whispering, "Thank you," before running to her aunt's car. Mrs. Rodriguez found me crying in the bathroom afterward. "You saved her," she said gently. "I just told her about the clinic. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person reaching out." The Pine Street appeals dragged on through winter. Each hearing brought new attempts to discredit evidence, claim procedural errors, or argue for reduced sentences. Grandma shielded me from most of it, but I overheard her phone conversations with prosecutors. One snowy evening in December, we were decorating our small Christmas tree when the doorbell rang. Grandma peered through the peephole and gasped. "Who is it?" I asked. She opened the door slowly. My mother stood on the porch, looking thin and worn. She wasn't supposed to be here. The restraining order was still in effect. "Please," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Just 5 minutes. I have something important to tell you." Grandma's hand moved toward her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Wait." Mom pulled out an envelope. "I'm turning state's evidence against the others. This is my immunity agreement." We stood frozen in the doorway. Finally, Grandma stepped aside. "5 minutes. Leo, go to your room." "No," I said firmly. "I want to hear this." Mom sat on the edge of our couch, clutching the envelope. "Your father is planning something. From prison. He's been in contact with people on the outside. They're targeting Dr. Bumble's clinic." "What kind of targeting?" Grandma demanded. "Arson. They want to destroy his records, intimidate other victims from coming forward." Mom's hands shook. "I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything." I studied her face, looking for deception. "Why should we believe you?" "Because I'm going to prison too, Leo. 3 to 5 years is part of my plea deal, but at least I can do one right thing first." She gave us names, dates, details of the planned attack. Grandma called the FBI agent handling the broader investigation. Within an hour, our house was full of federal agents taking Mom's statement. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. I didn't respond. Some apologies came too late. The planned attack on the clinic was thwarted. 3 men were arrested with accelerants and weapons in a van 2 blocks away. The investigation revealed a network of Pine Street sympathizers who believed the parents were victims of a witch hunt. Dr. Bumble refused to close the clinic despite the threat. Instead, he hired security and installed new cameras. Maya organized volunteers to escort families in and out. The community rallied around them. Spring arrived with unexpected news. Jackson, who had testified against the Pine Street parents, was found dead in his cell. Official cause was sewer slide, but Grandma and I exchanged knowing looks when we heard he'd been scheduled to testify in the federal cases the next week. "They're still reaching people from inside," I said. "Which is why we're moving," Grandma announced. I stared at her. "What?" "I've been offered a job in Oregon, far from here, from all of this. You could start fresh, be a normal kid. But what about the other cases? What about the clinic?" She pulled me close. "You've done more than enough, sweetheart. It's time to let others carry this burden." I thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to run, to be just Leo in a place where no one knew my story. But another part remembered Emma's bruised arms, Sammy's frightened face, all the kids still out there needing help. "I want to stay," I told Grandma finally. "At least until I finish middle school. These kids need to know someone understands." She sighed but nodded. "Then we stay. But we're getting a better security system." The federal trials began that summer. I testified via video link again, describing the patterns I'd noticed, the recording I'd made, the network of abuse I'd uncovered. This time, the defense attorneys were less aggressive. The evidence was too overwhelming, the public attention too intense. One by one, convictions came down. Doctors who'd prescribed unnecessary medications, teachers who'd ignored obvious signs, police officers who'd buried reports. The network unraveled, reaching into state government offices and medical boards. During a break in testimony, I sat with Dr. Bumble in a secure room. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Everything you've been through?" "No," I said without hesitation. "Do you regret losing your license the first time?" "Never. It led me to you, to stopping this." He adjusted his glasses. "Though I do regret not being believed sooner. How many kids suffered while I was labeled the boogeyman? But you never gave up. That matters." He smiled sadly. "Neither did you. That matters more." The summer ended with a celebration at the clinic. Families we'd helped gathered for a barbecue in the small parking lot. Kids played games while adults shared resources and support. I helped Maya serve food, feeling oddly normal for once. Sammy found me by the drink table. He looked healthier, had grown several inches. "I'm starting regular school again in the fall," he said proudly. "That's amazing." "Yeah, my therapist says I'm ready, and I'm going to join the soccer team." He paused. "None of this would have happened without you. You were brave enough to let Dr. Bumble help you. That started everything. But you were brave enough to look closer when everyone else looked away." As the party wound down, I noticed a new family hovering at the edges. A woman with 2 young children, all bearing the telltale signs of fear and hypervigilance I'd learned to recognize. Maya approached them gently, offering food and a quiet place to talk. The cycle continued, but now there was help. Real help. That night, Grandma found me writing in my journal. "What are you working on?" "Just keeping notes about patterns I notice, things that might help other kids spot abuse." I showed her pages of observations. "Maybe it could be a book someday, for kids like I was." She kissed my forehead. "My brave boy. But remember, you're allowed to just be a kid too." too, I know, but this is part of who I am now. School started again with me in 8th grade. Mrs. Rodriguez had moved up to teach my grade, specifically requesting to follow our class. She integrated lessons about body safety and trusted adults into her curriculum, never mentioning my involvement, but always catching my eye during these discussions. 3 more kids came forward that year. Each time, the system responded faster, more effectively. The clinic expanded to 3 locations. Maya graduated and became a full-time social worker. Dr. Bumble received a commendation from the medical board that had once revoked his license. The Pine Street houses finally sold, most demolished by new owners who wanted no association with the property's dark history. I biked past one day and saw a playground being built where the Patterson house once stood. It felt like justice. Winter brought the news that my father had been culled in prison. The official report called it an inmate dispute, but whispers suggested he'd threatened the wrong person's child from inside. I felt nothing when Grandma told me. He'd been dead to me since that slap. Mom's letters arrived monthly from her minimum security facility. I never opened them. Grandma kept them in a box, saying I might want them someday. I doubted it, but didn't argue. As spring approached, I prepared for high school entrance exams. My grades were good, my recommendations strong. Nobody mentioned my past in the applications, just my community service at the clinic and my peer mentoring. One afternoon, while volunteering at the clinic, a young boy approached me. "Are you Leo, the one who saved all those kids?" I knelt to his level. I just spoke up when I saw something wrong. Anyone can do that. "My teacher says you're a hero. Heroes are just regular people who don't stay quiet. You can be one too if you ever need to be." He nodded solemnly and ran back to his mother. Dr. Bumble overheard and smiled. "Still uncomfortable with the hero label? Because I'm not one. I was just a scared kid who got lucky. The best heroes usually are." The anniversary of the first trial arrived with media requests we declined. Grandma and I spent the day quietly, visiting the memorial garden planted for children who hadn't survived their abuse. Too many names were etched on the stone, including some from Pine Street we'd learned about too late. That evening, we attended a support group for families affected by the case. The room was full, but felt intimate. Parents shared their guilt at not seeing signs. Foster families discussed challenges and victories. Survivors spoke about their healing journeys. When my turn came, I simply said, "I still have nightmares sometimes, about basements and bruises and being called a liar. But then I remember all of you, and I know speaking up was worth it." The meeting ended with announcements. New legislation had passed requiring better communication between state medical boards. Teacher training on abuse recognition was now mandatory. The clinic model was being replicated nationally. Change was happening, slowly but steadily. As we drove home, Grandma asked, "Any regrets about not moving to Oregon?" This is where I need to be right now. And when you don't need to be here anymore, then maybe I'll go, but not running away, moving forward. She squeezed my hand. That's my wise boy. High school acceptance letters arrived in March. I'd gotten into a good school across town, far from my old neighborhood, but close enough to continue volunteering. It felt like the right balance between moving on and staying connected. The night before graduation from middle school, Dr. Bumble hosted a dinner for all the young volunteers. We sat around his living room, sharing stories and laughing. These weren't the broken, frightened kids from the alley anymore. They were survivors, advocates, friends. "You all have choices now," Dr. Bumble said as dessert was served. "You can leave this behind, live lives untouched by what happened, or you can use your experiences to help others. Both are valid, both are brave." Sammy spoke first. "I want to be a social worker, like Maya." Emma, who'd moved back to town with her aunt, added, "I'm thinking about law, prosecution specifically." Others shared their dreams, teaching, medicine, counseling. Some just wanted normal jobs and quiet lives. All were supported. When they looked at me, I shrugged, still figuring it out. "But whatever I do, I'll keep watching, keep noticing, keep speaking up." "The eternal vigilance of Leo," Maya teased gently. "Someone has to be the boogeyman for the real monsters," I replied. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. Grandma fussed with my cap while I fidgeted in my robe. The ceremony was typical, speeches about bright futures and endless possibilities. But when they called my name, the applause was louder, longer. I caught Dr. Bumble wiping his eyes in the audience. After the ceremony, as families took pictures and celebrated, a woman approached. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Leo, I'm Sarah Webb, Dr. Marcus Webb's wife." Ex-wife now. My body tensed. "I wanted to thank you. What you uncovered saved my daughter. I didn't know what he was doing. The children he was hurting with those prescriptions. She's safe now because of you." She pressed a card into my hand and disappeared into the crowd. I looked at it later, a therapist specializing in children of perpetrators. Another ripple effect I hadn't expected. The summer passed quietly. I worked at the clinic, read books, played video games like a normal teenager. Sometimes I could almost forget everything that had happened. Then I'd see a child flinch or notice unusual bruises, and the vigilance would return. One August evening, as I helped close the clinic, Dr. Bumble pulled me aside. "I have something for you." He handed me a wrapped package. Inside was a new Nintendo 3DS, the latest model. "I know yours was entered into evidence and never returned," he said. "Thought you should have a replacement. I don't know if I'll ever need to record anything again. Hopefully not. But tools of justice come in many forms. Sometimes it's a medical degree. Sometimes it's a gaming device in the right hands at the right time." I hugged him impulsively. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for believing an old boogeyman."